Hey guys, welcome to Stacking Chairs, the youth ministry podcast about all things youth ministry. Whether you're in youth group or in youth camp or any way that you seek to reach youth with the gospel of Jesus Christ, that's what we're going to talk about today. And I just went right a little bit into our Word of Life's vision statement.
That was great.
Thanks, Josh.
Great.
Hey, my name's Kyle Gray. I'm one of the hosts here, joined by my friend and co-host,
Josh Paul Hamas.
I don't think we call each other co-hosts.
No, I say my other
fellow
host or
yeah,
a fellow host, but
yeah.
co-host is still the correct term.
Yeah. I'm not offended by it.
No, why would it be?
Well, I think sometimes
manager and co-manager.
I'm the assistant regional manager of the branch of the.
Yeah.
I remember one time somebody was like, "Oh, Kyle, you're the chief cardboard exportier," and I'm like, "What's that mean?" They're like, "You're the kid that picks up the trash." I was like, well, "Thank you for giving me like a title to make me feel important." Hey, today we are joined by our good friend
Dylan Franklin.
It's
weird to say my own name.
Dylan's been on the show already.
Yeah, he
Twice?
was on once. No, just once before. Once before we talked about media in ministry.
I think because of where he used to sit and the extra things that we used
to be the switcher.
throw to him. It feels like he's
been on a lot more.
Dylan's one of those guys that's like, man, we've been friends for 5, but it feels like we've been friends for 15.
Yeah.
But actually, that's not what I was going for. I was going for like the other statement where it's like, we've been married for 2, but it feels like 14.
Oh,
Hey, so it is a little earlier. So I can tell in my mind that I'm a little more groggy. So I really hope that I'm not going to say stuff.
You were going to say fresh? I thought you were going to say fresh. And I was like, I don't feel fresh. I was like, I feel, because we started even earlier
we did.
than our usual work day.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 4 a.m.
So just in case you are watching this, because you can watch this on YouTube, you can go to our YouTube channel, search Word of Life Fellowship.
We have the most views on an episode, this past episode, because the documentary went up as well. But we had like, well, I won't say the number because it last sounds a lot more pitiful when you say it out loud. But.
Hey, we have 13,000 listeners.
13,000 listeners. Thank you guys for being one of the many. No,
Josh, this has been a fun time. We've run into some good times. We've hit some problems. Speaking of, let's talk about problem children in youth group.
Well, let me also give a shout out. I didn't know Matt Noble, my youth pastor that I work with.
Hey, Matt Noble!
He listens.
Sorry, whenever people say shout out, I'm waiting for somebody to actually like shout.
No, so he listens to the show, and yesterday at church, he goes, "Hey, Polly," and I said, "Where'd you hear that name?" He goes, "Polly, I just, I have my sources." And I was like, "Where'd you hear that name?" He goes, "I listened to your podcast." And I said, "Oh no, I didn't know you listened." He goes, "I told you I listened." And I was like, "I know, but I didn't think you actually listened." So,
wow.
So now I'm nervous that I've said something that's not true about Matt. But I think I told him, I was like, "I think I've only ever said good things about you. So I think you're in the clear. I think I'm in the clear."
Yeah, it's almost weird to me every once in a while when somebody's like, "Hey, I listened to the podcast." I'm like, "You do?"
Yeah.
I'm like, "That's awesome," but you do?
I'm flattered. Thank you.
You're always
really
more worried
cool.
about the follow-up statement afterwards.
Yeah.
It's like,
hey, I listened to the podcast.
I watched the video and
Yeah. So that's
So
good.
Yeah. So we do want to talk about, the problem child, quote unquote. And this question actually came from Dylan.
Which is why Dylan, this is the only reason why Dylan is on.
As I say, as a former problem child myself, I feel like, I just wanted to ask.
Let's get this on the table.
Yeah.
Because I was absolutely
100%
a problem child.
Me too.
But like, I have zero problem. Shout out to Greg Hench, who I don't think listens to this, but Greg, I will have you.
Shout out to Tanner as well.
Oh yeah, shout out to Tanner.
Pastor Matt
but Greg was my junior high youth pastor.
Yeah.
And literally, I was that annoying kid that could listen and have another conversation or do other things. And then he would be like, "What did I just say?" And I would say what he just said.
Yes.
And so then he would be like, "Just go to the stairs. Just go to the stairs." And I would sit, because we did youth group in his house.
Yeah.
I would sit on a stair in his house. And I was there so often that he told me he was going to get a little bronze plaque and put it on the.
So funny.
And then after I graduated, he looked at a kid one day, and he at least he tells me, he says this. He said, "Go to Kyle's chair, go to Kyle's stair." And I was like, "That's awesome."
Matt just did that.
Leaving a legacy that matters.
Matt just did that in the past. I almost said episode of youth group. He did it in the last youth group. One of the kids was not listening. He said, "What did I just say?" And he couldn't say it. So he's not that. He doesn't have that same
annoyance.
skill. I was gonna say skill that you have. Yeah.
Polly, tell us, how were you the annoying kid?
Mine was
not annoying kid. Let's be clear.
No, yeah.
We're not talking about something. everybody can be annoying to everybody.
Yes.
We're talking about the kid, and we're saying for ourselves personally that we know we were a problem.
Yeah, and I would say I was the problem child in the same way that I would say that others I've worked with have been the problem children, which is speaking up all the time in the middle of youth group, making comments, trying to be witty or like making a joke, like getting people to laugh, you know?
Yeah.
And no, that's definitely how I was, and still can be the problem child in my environments. So
like you can try to ignore me, but I'm there.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make sure you know.
Yeah.
Kind of like that stain on your arm.
Yeah. We said we weren't going to bring it up.
No, I said I was going to bring it up.
But I said no.
Only on the Word of Life Fellowship YouTube channel. Check it out. Josh's stain.
Stain on my arm.
Yeah.
From the coffee.
Dylan, how were you the problem child?
So I was the pastor's kid, but I was also a little bit of the entitled pastor's kid. But so that was a little bit of my why, like not why, but like how I did it. But also it was my biggest downfall. So shout out to Davy and Tina Keys. She is probably the person who has stood up to me most in my life. Like that's the way I remember it.
She sounds like my hero.
Just some examples. So I would stay, like we had basketball. I would play basketball up until like if youth group started at 6:30, I'd play until like 6:31, 6:32. But we would play and get like super sweaty and then come in. No. But like, I mean, it's disobedience.
6:30 and 30 seconds.
We were told to be upstairs ready to go by 6:30 and we were out there still playing, you know? And then we'd always come in stinky and she'd hate it. So she'd start literally dousing us with like spray deodorant when we walked in and all that stuff. But then probably the worst one was I had a big row anyway with her about phone Bibles, like having.
Whoa. You can't just glance over a word you made up.
I didn't make that up. Row. You had a big row.
Why can't you just say a big argument?
A big argument about with her.
There's a word for argument that's row. I've never heard that.
Okay,
Guys, leave in the comments. Have you heard someone use the term row before for an argument? Spat, potentially?
No, it's
spat, if you will.
I think it's ROW, like literally row, but I'm
you mean
not
like
sure.
row? Does that mean fight your boat?
Fight your boat.
Row is a noisy disturbance or quarrel.
There you go.
Wow.
So that's what we had.
Was this a noisy disturbance?
It was. Well, so what happened was
pots and pans out and
she had a rule, like, I mean, because this was right in like 2012, 13, when like phone Bibles were starting to become a thing, is that like, hey, I appreciate that you have your Bible on your phone, but when you're in youth group, I want you to use your physical Bible.
Gotcha.
And her reasoning was not wanting to get distracted. But of course, I said, I'm not getting distracted while I'm sitting there checking Facebook and other, you know. Yeah. So I was getting distracted. And one time she finally said, you know what, Dylan, give me your phone and go to your dad's office. And let me tell you, after that, and what happened after that, I did not try and pull out my phone Bible and
you know
in
what's
youth group
funny?
anymore.
All of our like problem child stories from growing up, I can still see inside of like our current personality and person.
Oh, absolutely.
Which I guess takes us to then, you know, working with these kids. There might be a kid who is talking all the time and it might just be part of who they are. How do you deal with that?
Well, and I think let's lay out the ground rule because again, we talked about this. We don't want to come across like we're complaining about students.
No.
We're complaining about issues.
Yeah.
And if we're going to complain about issues, every student brings issues to the table. And necessarily what bothers you, not necessarily what bothers you doesn't necessarily bother me or bother Dylan. Dylan is a youth leader in his youth group.
Fresh.
And so he is
very, very fresh.
He's so fresh and so clean.
1 or 2 months.
And so like we all have those students.
Yeah.
We also, let's put another point of clarification. Let's be honest. There are some times that I just walk into youth group in a funk myself.
Yeah.
And so it's not that kid is being bothersome or being a pain.
Yeah.
I'm just in a bad mood.
Yeah.
And I project, but here's what we're talking about. And I think it'd be good for us to clarify this. Let's talk about how do you handle the one-offs, you know, there's a disruption, and we can talk about the different types of disruptions, but there's a disruption or there's a person causing a problem. You know, we can define
something that's distracting from the message, something that's distracting from the small group.
Yeah. And then on the other side, I think we need to discuss, there are some people in all of our ministries that person regularly bothers us.
Yeah.
Or regularly we feel or you feel is a regular disturbance or a distraction. And so how do you deal with both of those cases? And let's again say, we're not going to solve the problem.
Yeah.
We're not going to give you the 3 easy steps to never being annoyed with a person ever again. That only happens in eternity. Amen. Josh.
Yeah.
As I drop my phone to be a problem. Well, okay, so let's think about it. There are just some times, and I to this day, like I'm sitting in a meeting and I will go, I could do this right now, and it would cause a distraction or a disturbance or whatever. That is still in my soul as I'm sitting on the front row of a camp meeting. And so
just looking for that distraction opportunity.
Yeah, it's horrible.
That's funny.
What a loser.
Well, let's start with the one-offs then. So Dylan had, I mean, what kind of sparked the question?
Yeah.
If
Give
you don't
a
mind,
quote unquote hypothetical situation, Dylan.
Obviously we want to be
Oh yeah, no. Well, okay, so here's the situation.
All the names have been changed to protect the innocent.
I feel like it's a pretty typical youth group. So this night was about 30 kids. It's about normal. And we split up for small groups into 4 groups. So middle school boys, middle school girls, high school boys, high school girls. So I normally go with the high school boys. There's 2 of us in there, and we typically do a pretty good job, but it still needs some crowd control. This particular night, the way that the youth leader situation shaked down, I ended up going with the middle school boys. Now, I don't know these guys as well. This is my first time with them.
Sure. But you get along with them better because you guys have similar personalities and
mental capabilities.
Yeah.
I play football with them. I play carpet ball with them. I'm actually a pretty baller carpet baller, by the way. I'm probably ranked number 2 or 3 in the youth group. Anyway, so we go and we actually aren't able to go inside and sit down at like a conference table or anything, like, because normally with the high school boys we sit down in like a conference room. So we're outside on just like the edge of the road near our church, like at the edge of the parking lot. And so the specific problem I was having is there was 1 or 2 of them that were like dialed in and like pretty good at listening.
Yeah.
But then the other 3 were literally looked like ping pong balls, just kind of walking around. And it was as much effort for me to crowd control them as it was to keep the conversation focused.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's really where I'm asking is like, all right, so forgetting the spiritual aspect of like running a small group, literally I have 5 or 6 kids that I'm trying to physically keep all focused as well as like in the same place. Like, how did I do that? And I just remember sitting there thinking like, oh my gosh, I need to go and call my youth leaders from middle school and thank them so much. And then from a spiritual standpoint, how do I keep the conversation focused even with those distractions?
Right.
And the conversation went pretty well. Those 2 kids that were tuned in, they were doing pretty good, but it was funny because by the end of it, they were all 6 standing up and just kind of like, all right, let's go to the next thing, you know?
Well, then, so if I may, I think we'll start off by saying like middle schoolers are their own like
category,
yeah, because they're going to need to move around and do stuff, and you're going to have them for a lot less time. Like, so our youth group ranges from 6th grade to 12th grade. Actually, I think we have a 12th grader. So we have a 6th to 12th grade range. Well, those kids in 6th grade can sit a lot less time than those in 12th grade. And so I guess we're kind of running into that too at times. But I think the answer, in short, like at least to start, is expect them to have to move around and build that into your schedule. Kyle, what do you think about that?
I think you got to know your audience.
Yeah.
I think sometimes there's that fluctuation point between having a steady schedule that everybody can kind of rest in that schedule, as well as changing it up enough every once in a while so that a kid's not bored with all right, we do this for 15 minutes. All right, we're going to do this for, but yeah.
Well, and one other kind of difficult element of it is like, okay, so 2 kids dialed in, 3 kids that were having problems. Well, one of the kids was the like totally not paying attention, totally just like ping ponging around doing stuff. But also the other kids were like, hey, he's doing this. Hey, he's like, it's like, I can see what's going on. It's not that hard. Gotcha. So you had me who's hey, this guy's doing something wrong, authority, you need to deal with it. But that kid was also interrupting, and so it's like, how do you both get the kid who's interrupting to stop, but also the kid who's talking, right? Like, how do you help them to say like, thank you, but I got it.
Well, I think we got to pay attention to environment too. For instance, the other day I was with 8th grade boys on a Sunday morning. Their teacher didn't show up, and so I stepped in and sat down. And it was so funny because they were like, "Hey, we have to go over the rules." And some of the rules they went over, like if you make a really good point, somebody throws an eraser at you. I'm like, I don't think that's maybe
it's a substitute teacher sort of moment. Yeah.
And so we were talking about different things and And I realized very quickly, number one, this guy does have order to his class. Mm-hmm. He has a very specific order to his class, and I'm not that guy.
Yeah.
And so right away, there's one boy who grabs like 4 to 6 sugar packets. He's like, I need my sugar packets. And he's sitting there and he's ripping them open. And but here's my problem. No. I can't guess if this teacher allows this kid to eat sugar packets or doesn't allow this kid to eat suger packets. I can't tell you if
Yeah, but you can probably guess, right?
Yeah, probably. Well, but I think you have to take that into consideration. You have to take into consideration you're not in a room, you're outside. For that, I know we're not trying to go, hey, let's solve the problems, but I would say, I would never put the middle school boys outside. Now, I shouldn't say that. I would put the middle school boys outside. But in your situation,
damage
I think that's an easier switch of, all right, high school, we're going to go sit outside, because if we give an infinite territory, I'm blanking on the games where you're walking down a corridor,
free roam versus
a free roam world.
Yeah.
You just put junior high boys in a free roam world and told them the objective is to listen to the bod. It's like, no, you need to put them in the right spot, in the right place and environment. And I don't think we pay enough attention to how are we setting up these students for success. The other thing that this guy had was a 3-strike rule. Oh. My problem was I didn't know how closely and so like a couple of the kids, where I started to get the idea was something happened and this one boy looks over and goes, we'll say, Josh, Mr. Dillon would have kicked you out 2 sentences ago. And I was like, all right, okay, I need to apply a little more pressure. And so we went a little longer, and then I finally looked at Josh and I said, Josh, I am doing everything in my power not to kick you out of this classroom. I'm trying to do everything within my power.
Yeah.
And so I think, as we kind of look at these situations, I think we have to ask ourselves, have we set these students up for success?
Yeah.
Number 2, do we understand the situation, the classroom, and then are we fighting for these kids? Or let's all be honest, there's sometimes we look for an opportunity to get these kids kicked out of youth group or kicked out of the situation because we're just frustrated. And I don't think that's necessarily the answer.
No, I would agree with you. It's easy to do that. And to your first point, I think you build that by creating structure and creating expectation.
Right. If
your kids know that, hey, if I do this, then my youth pastor or youth leader will do this, and it's the same every time, and you set that standard and say, hey, here's how we're going to interact.
Right.
Here's what we're going to do. Here's the tolerance that we have for speaking out in the middle of youth group, and here's where I'm going to correct, and here's how I'm going to correct.
Right. Yeah.
That's something that's easy to say, extremely difficult to do, because you have to be resolved in your mind to follow through with those decisions. It's just like parenting, which I'm discovering as my daughter gets older. Like if I say, do not touch the outlet, and she touches the outlet, she then gets a spanking. And if she gets in trouble, and therefore, if the next time she grabs the outlet and I don't do that, I'm not communicating to her that there's
you're not consistent.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we have to build that consistency into our youth group, because you'll take a problem child who has no structure maybe in their classroom because they just get away with stuff because the teacher can't handle it. And maybe they're in an environment where their parents are very strict and have good structure. So at home, they're very well behaved.
Yeah.
And then when they get to youth group, they don't have that same structure, and they're like, well, now I can just do whatever I want, and my parents aren't here to see it.
Right.
I think that's where we have to build structure as well, and still come alongside these kids to let them know, hey, we love you, we want to be around you and spend time with you.
Yeah.
So other half question. So the other time that we have problems is during our meeting time. And so the way it's set up is like probably 4 rows with a middle aisle and then, the speaker up front. So one of the things I've tried to do is normally I would sit on the back row because I can kind of see everything, keep tabs on it. But I've started actually going and sitting next to,
praise Jesus. Can we have a hallelujah ceremony going on up in here?
And it's funny because genuinely the first time I did it. Oh my
goodness.
The first time I did it, I was trying to be really friendly, but then because it was the problem is a high school boy and they, him and this girl are talking and joking, and he's trying to impress her, which I'm like, I get that. That was me. I was trying to impress people all the time with my jokes, blah, 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 blah. So I just sat there with him, and I could just feel the vibe being ruined, like the whole time I was there.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
what do you think about that? Like, is that something, especially because I know you spend probably more time up front.
Oh, well,
during,
but see, and let me say, let me throw in, and I think we've already talked about this before. And no, I'm not talking about having a planning meeting, although I think you should have planning meeting.
Have you mentioned planning meetings before?
I don't think so. Brand new thought. Hey, no, youth leaders, youth pastors, stop standing in the back. Stop holding up the walls when the only time you're going to step into the situation is when you step forward and go, excuse me, you need to be quiet. Like, no.
That's exactly how I said it. That's so great.
You'd like be in the situation. And I know there's that awkwardness of, do you sit yourselves ahead of time and the kids sit around you?
Yeah.
Or do you look for an opportunity to sit down, or let it be natural? And when you're asking all the other kids to sit down, you go sit down and you be confident, but put yourself in that spot where you think you can be the most. It might not be right next to the kid.
Sure.
It might be in a place where you can have an eye shot to that kid, like, dude, stop.
Yeah.
What are you doing? But I think we have to put ourselves, we're not going to have relationships.
Yeah.
This is the other reason why I think we need to be playing games and having fun, because when you play games and you have fun with kids, you're building a different side of relationship, not a listen to me, but a I like you. Like, let's hang out together.
Yeah.
And I think that's so key and so important. I've got a student or two that I'm trying to love at youth group, and I do love them.
Yeah.
But I'm having to put myself in opportunities and in places to go, hey, listen, like, I don't want to just be the guy that's looking at you going, what are you doing? Like, stop, you know, but I want to, connect with you. I want to build a friendship with you.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. And a youth leader brought this up to me this past weekend. We were talking through some different things, and they said, there's a difference in being friendly and being friends.
Yes. Yeah.
You're not friends with the kids in youth group because that puts yourselves on an equal peer level.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, in some ways I agree with them, and in some ways I don't agree with them.
Okay.
I understand the concept of what they're trying to communicate.
Sure.
And I agree with the overall concept that, yes, when I'm friends with somebody, it is somewhat of a peer-to-peer level.
Yeah.
At the same time, I always wanted to know that my youth leaders were my friends.
Yeah. I think you kind of have to split the definition of the word, essentially.
Right.
Because you have to be their friend, but at the same time, you can't just be their, I guess you could say, like, their buddy or their chum, or like,
but even
whatever
like,
the current term is.
like we talk
for
about it
Gen
as
Z.
a boss, right? But it's like, you can be their friend, but you can't be their friend first, almost, right? Like,
we've talked about that, because at one point I was Dylan's supervisor, and I would say, like, I'm like, listen, I have to separate the two. Like, you and I are friends. We were friends before I was his supervisor, and then I was his supervisor after we had already been friends. And I'm like, our dynamic has to be different, because I have to make decisions that aren't going to be just a friend. Yeah. And there are times when, as a friend, I just say, dude, that sucks. And like, we can complain about something or whatever. Like, it's entirely different.
But that's what I'm wondering is, like, as a youth leader, right? Like, we don't need to be their friend first. Like, we need to be there, right? But I mean, that's where I'm asking. Like, does that same principle kind of apply?
Two awesome bits of advice that I was shared with. Number one, my first year doing program, my mom, who was a 6th grade science teacher, said, if you get them to be your friend first, they will never respect you. If you get them to respect you, they will always want to be your friend. That doesn't mean you're a jerk. Yeah. But you know, for sure. And I was like, okay. And I would say in this instance, as the youth leader, there has to be clearly defined things. And I would say with that youth leader that said to me, hey, we're not friends. Yeah. I'm like, no, I think it's in instances, because I think that's really hard to split the definition. But I think
you can't say that to the kid.
In instances, well, and they did. Yeah. But in instances,
this is when you were a teenager.
No. Yeah, whatever. It doesn't. The specific time of play. Anyways, yes. But I think if anybody's crossing that line, in the same way that, dude, we're friends. Yeah, we're friends. The three of us are friends. Yeah. But here's what I know.
Yes, I'm sorry. Let me affirm that.
If any of us disrespect our significant other, the situation will, a switch will be flipped.
Oh yeah, no,
you know, sure. If you disrespect my kids, Now, I think my kids, hopefully I'm like, okay, well, let me process. Was my son or daughter being a punk? But even still, if there's a certain way, I still am going to look at you and be like, Josh, I love you, dude, but you need a little checkup from the neck up. The second thing is I go back to, again, Greg's brother, Eric. Shout out to Eric Hench.
Ew.
The whole idea of when I got in the car, I remember him saying to me one day, dude, from the moment that the door shuts and you start the job, I am your boss.
Yeah.
And I can be a bossy friend or a friendly boss. Mm-hmm. And I was like, no, I would rather you be a friendly boss. And then outside of it, he's like, when that door shuts at the end of the workday, we are just friends. I'm not the boss. That's totally off the table. Yeah. And I do think that comes with a certain level of maturity.
Yeah.
That as their frontal lobe is still developing, these kids don't understand.
Yeah. But I think that's even something
close.
That I realized is like, I mean, however smart I thought I was, like there was no way to explain to me how to behave when I was in middle school or even high school.
Your frontal lobe's not even done developing at your age. Like
Praise
genuine,
God.
you know that. Like I think the frontal lobe finishes developing at 25.
I don't know.
I think like
I played one in a skit one time though.
Oh, nice.
But I think that's the thing that I realized is like I'm not going to say the word tough love, but the idea of like, hey, doing something that's not comfortable, being how do I say this?
Fortnite.
Back it up. Not Fortnite.
Let's go.
Like as a youth leader, being like telling them to do something like this is what you need to do right now. You need to do this, but like you would normally try to explain it to them, but they can't understand it. And like, I think I see that now coming full picture. But realizing that dynamic and being, like you said, a bossy friend, not a friend.
And I think you got to, again, I go back to so much of where I think our starting point, whether it's a one-time off or it's a consistent situation.
Yeah.
I think you have to look at the environment. Mm-hmm. Have we set this student up for success? Oh, this is a brand new student. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that student then, and I don't even have a problem saying a brand new student is within their first 3 months attending youth group.
I'd say that's fair.
If you think about it, if they come to youth group and they've been there for 3 months, they've possibly been there for 12 times.
Yeah.
And I know you're like, well, Kyle, there are more than 4, youth group because you have Sunday school, you got all these different things. Yeah, but honestly, they may have only been at 3 youth group meetings because you had a special event or you missed a week or whatever.
Yep. No, absolutely.
And so expecting a kid to understand the environmental cues and the setup and the situation when they've been there 4 times, I don't think that's fair.
Yeah.
And so have we set them up for success?
Mm-hmm.
Are we as leaders doing the very thing in the back when I'm watching my leaders on their phones, checking their phones, doing different things, looking at their Apple Watch, and then we get mad at the kids for sitting in the seats, looking at their phones and checking their Apple Watch. And I'm like, guys, it's consistency. It's consistency. Yeah. I think we've got to ask ourselves the question, and I think this has to be on the table. Are you just too boring for them to listen to?
Dang. Figuring out how to be more dynamic.
Yeah. Even in like for instance, Dylan, I think you're a pretty engaging guy.
Aw.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm also engaged.
You are engaged. Congratulations. Wow. Had nothing to do with anything. But
I'm engaging.
Yeah, you are engaging.
Engaging.
But even in that situation, okay, you took middle schoolers, you took them outside. I feel like I'm coming across like Dylan. You guys set up your middle schoolers outside in a free roam territory. Yeah. And maybe, just maybe, to quote my friend Kyle Gray, maybe, just maybe, that moment you weren't that engaging. Mm-hmm. And again, our thing is, but 2 kids were paying attention. Yeah, but who were those 2 kids? Were those 2 kids the ones that always pay attention, or were those 2 kids the ones that actually are always hungry? Mm. And I'm not saying that we need to only teach in such a way for the kids that aren't hungry. I'm just saying I think we need to go back to the playbook and go, did we set these students up for success?
Yeah.
So you would say, to deal with, I'm going to say problem situations even, I would say. Mm-hmm. Like the best way to deal with those situations is first off, deal with them before they occur. Make sure you're setting them up not to happen.
Yeah, set your environment.
Yeah. I would say that.
Yeah, I think so. And I think also the point you made of like, all right, you have this information from scripture. You have this lesson. It's a steak, all right? Yeah. You prepare that steak differently for each person, all right? Mm-hmm. I'm going to prepare a steak differently for you guys than I would for my 1.5-year-old, almost 2-year-old daughter, where I would string up the steak and like shred it for her to be able to eat. So the idea is that, hey, you know what? This is steak, but maybe we have to adapt not just our environment, but the way that we communicate to keep things in a way that's tangible and can be digested by our audience.
Yeah. Well,
does that help, you think?
I mean, even scripture says, add salt to stuff, make it salty. I had heard somebody say one time, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, but you can make
salt the oats.
Yes, you can make the oats salty.
I've heard that. Yep.
And so again, like, are we, and I'm thinking of all the different tangents of where people could go. Listen to exactly what I'm saying. Are you taking whatever it is that you as a youth team, because you've sat down and done your planning meetings, are you setting what you're about to teach as a youth team? Are you setting it up in such a way to make it engaging for the audience that you're speaking to?
Yeah.
Whatever it is, whether you say we're going to teach through the 12 major points of theology, or we're going to walk through, a guy told me the other day, dude, what we're doing is we're walking through the major portions of every single book of the Bible in the order that we're walking in. Or in the order that they were taught in. And so again, kind of going through those different things.
Yeah.
But even if you're going to do topical stuff, even if you're going to do a games night, if you're going to do all these different things, are we setting these kids up for success?
Yeah.
Have we set the environment? Have we set the situation room up so that we are preparing them and our leaders engaged in it to participate and help everybody have the most success at the same time? And this is probably more so for our consistent, bothersome kids. I don't want to call them problem kids, but sometimes I don't think, Josh, you brought a really good point up. I don't think we pay enough attention to the outside environment that they come from.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
They're very well. I mean, how many times have we said, and have we talked about the idea that when these kids come to youth camp, it may be the very first time that they ever experience somebody showing them love, and they don't know how to process it. And so they smother their counselor, or they test them a little bit. Like, you can't be real. Like,
how much do you really love
we get
me?
kids from the foster care system, and they're like, oh, I know people who can love me in the first 2 hours. I want to know, are you going to love me after the first 2 days?
Yeah, that always breaks my heart. Just like thinking, sorry, complete sidebar in my head.
No, it's true.
Yeah, but it's just, it's very sobering.
But we have those kids in our youth groups. We have those kids in our ministries. We have those kids that they show up, and yes, there's some kids like Dylan and I who are the pastor's sons who are like, okay, I own this territory. Okay.
Yeah.
You also have the guy that is like, my parents are complete, like, regimented rule followers. And here you're going to give me freedom. But we also have ones that have total freedom at home. And so when you go to introduce any rules, I mean, there are so many. I would strongly encourage you, before you react to that kid, pause.
Yeah.
And ask questions.
Yeah.
You know,
I think it's important.
Look for ways, instead of ways to put ourselves in a position. What if we met those kids with the same grace and mercy and humility that we want them to meet us with?
Yeah.
And if they push back, do I think that there's a time that you look at that kid and go, dude, I'm trying with you. I'm trying to show you grace. I'm trying to show you kindness.
Yeah.
I'm trying to show you. I really try not to ever call anybody out from stage. I've had to a couple times.
Sure.
I don't like it, because to me,
that was a very savage moment.
dude,
that happened to you?
It humiliates people.
No,
it humiliates
and that's
people.
not our goal.
And that's not
our goal.
We should be humble, not
Yes.
humiliated.
Amen.
Yeah.
Put it on a shirt, macrame it, somebody.
I think we have to wrap up, just because we do have to have a shorter episode today. But let us just say, this is not going to solve your child problem, quote unquote. Like, these elements may help you, just like we often do. We give you tools that we've come across.
Right.
But this is not going to be your fix-all to deal with your problem children.
And so when you're in your next planning meeting with your youth leaders, you can bring up some of these practical points.
Which is so funny, because I hate planning meetings, but they're so necessary.
Yeah.
But I would say this, even just the question of, does your youth group as a group know what the plan is?
Yes.
And do your youth leaders know the plan of, hey, hey guys, this is how we react. Hey, this is how we go. This is how we deal with it. When I showed up to this new youth group, and it was like, well, hey, we usually do this. Well, I need you to explain to me what the process is, because I want to step into that, and I don't want to kind of create my own situation.
Yeah, catch the vision.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Hey, we could go on and on and on about this, but it's time for
Small group.
All right,
you.
small group
Big
is
part
a
of that.
time, because since Kyle did the opening, I get to do this part.
Yes, you do.
Small groups is a time where we talk about things that are funny or interesting or just encouraging about what God's doing in our lives
catching
or
up on
your
our
lives.
week, you know?
Catching up. It's small group. And so today we are going to quickly share some stories of when we were problem children in youth ministry. Kyle shared a brief story of his own. I don't know if he has another one or not tucked away. And Dylan.
So, as Dylan's thinking of one, we played hide and go seek. Again, not a good idea, but we played hide and go seek at my youth pastor's house, the junior high youth pastor, Greg.
Yeah.
And me and a kid went into his shed, and I had just discovered, I can't remember if I discovered or if the kid discovered, that you could have a lighter or a match and you could take a spray paint and you could like start a flamethrower. And
Yes.
like after like 3 or 5 minutes of us like doing this, he busts in the thing and he's like, "What are you doing?" And we're like, "How did you find us?" He was like, "Morons, there's a big glass window. I'm seeing fire." Shoot up.
That's hilarious. Oh my gosh. Dylan, go ahead.
I know I have better ones, but the only one that's coming to mind is like the big thing we did at this specific youth group was we'd go play laser tag once every month or every other month. And so what's the number one rule when you play laser tag? No running, right?
yes.
Oh, yeah.
no running.
Yeah.
Break that rule.
Yeah, all the time. And so I was a bigger kid when I was 14. I was, still, bigger. And there was a little kid who was with us, like, not even going to the church, just came with us, friend.
Yeah.
And I was running and I decked him. I mean, I did not see him. I rounded a corner and just hit him.
Problem child.
And he ended up having to
Go to the hospital.
No, he had to sit out the rest of the time because he had a concussion.
Oh my gosh.
You concussed a kid?
I did.
You concussed a visitor?
But it was, and that was the best part was, Miss Tina sat me down afterwards and said, well, no, that's the worst part is really what I mean is Miss Tina sat me down and said, "Dylan, you can't run, but also like, this is a visitor. We need to make a good impression on them, not literally make a physical impression on them."
Physical impression.
Wow.
All right, I'll give mine quick. I think mine wasn't a moment, but more of just in one story, it helps tell the story. I remember one time I was going around, I had apparently gotten a new shirt from like Aeropostale or something. You guys remember when Aeropostale was huge?
It's still huge. What you
Yes,
talking
of
about?
course, my bad. So I'm wearing this shirt and I'm like going around and I was like talking to people and like intentionally trying to show off this shirt that I got. This one girl just straight up called me out and says like, "Stop fishing for compliments." And I felt so small, but I realized I was like, oh my gosh, I am looking for people to check out my shirt and like call attention to myself. But I will say, to Matt's credit, my youth pastor growing up, the thing that he did that really helped me, which I realized just now we didn't talk about, was he gave me responsibility. And he said, "Hey, come be a part of this. We're going to create this group of leaders called like the student leadership team, where we're going to give you responsibility in the youth group. We're going to meet at like 5:30 in the morning once a month and do a Bible study together." And like, yes, I was still annoying all through that time, but I love this about Matt. Different Matt. Again, I love both the Matts in my life that have been youth pastors.
Which one do you love more?
The Matt growing up was the one who said, he gave me that and he saw leadership potential in me. And he said like, God can work through you even though you're annoying, and gave me that opportunity. So I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, I think far too many times we look at those frustrations in youth group and they grow up to be future pastors, future leaders. And so look past the frustrations, look for the opportunity, give that kid a chance to step up, because then Matt had the chance to look back and go, "Josh, man, you're a leader. You're up front.
Yeah.
I can't have you acting this way or doing this thing."
Well, and here I am now with
Good job, Matt.
Yeah, and now with Matt Noble, my youth pastor I'm working with now, he gave me that same opportunity 3 years ago.
Dude.
2 years ago. 2 years ago.
So cool moment. And then I can, when my wife and I were, asked to be missionaries with Word of Life.
Yeah.
After I talked to my parents, the very first person I called was my junior high youth pastor.
Yeah.
Just to say thank you.
Yeah.
Because
I love that.
The coolest thing was, the funny thing is I called him up and I said, "Guess what?" And he goes, "You're having a baby." And I was like, "No." He was like, "Oh." And I was like, "I'm going to be a missionary." He's like, I'm really excited for you." I am, but like, I thought.
Did you call him first when you did have a baby or?
No.
Oh,
not at all.
Big. Well, hey, you know what? What you guys do makes a difference. And,
Absolutely.
And see that opportunity in the students you're working with, and it makes a huge difference.
And honestly, that is a very satisfying wraparound for me, is now being here and seeing like, oh wow, like I'm getting to make that difference that was made in my life, or at least trying to.
And I'm proud of you, Dylan, for being a part of your youth group now, because I know we've talked about that in the past. I'm like, hey, you need to be involved in your local church, and Dylan has really stepped up, and I think you're doing an amazing job. So I'm really proud of you, and I love you, man. And
Matt, Davey, Tina, Greg, so thankful for your input into our lives. We love you guys.
Yeah, we do. All right, guys, this has been Stacking Chairs. Talking about, the quote unquote problem child,
which we all were.
We all were.
Absolutely.
And maybe sometimes
and still are.
Yeah,
Still are. I think all three of us are still actively problem children. So
at times, but you know what? That's a journey of sanctification, man. God's still working in all of us. So anyway, thank you guys for listening so much. Follow us on social media, Stacking Chairs Pod everywhere. We'd love to hear what you think.
Email us, subscribe to it, share it, leave us a comment. We'd love to hear from you.
Oh, Kyle, you got to do that thing you do.
Stack those chairs!